And I love, Bob, how you talk about the idea or the scholarship point that Gnosticism, to define it, you have to define it as a sort of, it really starts with theodicy, doesn't it? Like Jnana Yoga and Jainism and all that, right? It's people saying, all right, who's the Bond villain here? We can't, what's going on kind of thing. Marvin Gaye, what's going on, right? So theodicy is a cornerstone of any Gnostic thought, and that helps explain other movements, like you say, like Lurianic Kabbalah, Mithraism, and so forth, right?
Yeah, any religion, though you feel alienated, especially Gnostic ones, from the world as it is, it's hard to believe that it is all inherently bad. I mean, it's hard to go that far. And so they will say, this could not be the creation of a good God, as other religions say it is. That something's wrong there. So what do we say? Well, there is an ultimate good God, but sure enough, he couldn't have created this world. So who did? Well, Plato had already distinguished between the one high God, the form of the good, and the demiurge, the craftsman who actually hands-on constructed the world. Well, he was no genius. It's like David Hume said once that, granted, there is a surprising amount of order in the world, but not enough to justify what Christians say about God. It's as if the Biden administration had created it. A committee of inept buffoons, and so that's that would explain it. And like another version of this that apocalyptic Jews and Christians had was that God created it and Satan got a hold of it and ruined it, but one day God will take the reins again. It's a sort of an analogous view, though not the same one. And so the demiurge is at fault, and we're implicated in it. Why aren't we acclimated to this kind of a world? Well, some people are, but some of us can see that this is wrong. Like Morpheus says to Neo, you feel like you don't really belong here, right? Well, yeah. Well, you don't. And here's why. The real you is the spark of the divine. Where'd you get that? It's part of God or of the realm of light in which he dwells, and I can show you how to isolate that and escape this veil of tears. So there is a world that is bad, and you should be aloof to it and concentrate on getting back to the pleroma, the divine fullness. And so that's theodicy. You're clearing God of these charges, like a Job. Why is God doing what he's doing? And it's the most profound book of the Bible. And at the end of it, God just says, hey, listen, Mr. Smart Guy, answer me this. What keeps the stars in the constellation of the Pleiades together? You got any ideas? Can you explain the migration of birds, or this or that or the other thing that you can see? You don't know, do you? Well, no. And he says, and you think you can second guess me? I'm God. I created this stuff. You expect to be able to psych me out and hold me responsible? Forget it. And then Job says, once again, he says, I had heard of you, but now I close my mouth. I'm ashamed of what I said. And he never finds out what happened. And it's a rebuke. It's what Schleiermacher called agnostic piety, that sometimes you just have to say, look, who am I to think I can figure this out? That's idolatry. If I think I've got God figured out, I have reduced him to an idol. If an idiot like me can understand it, it can't be the real God.
Mhm.
And this is sort of what Gnostics are saying, only they believe the knowledge is available. And the which, of course, Hindus say that, and others do, but it's not available to the common slob, the pew potato. And they may not even wonder why. And it's all right. It's all right. Their religion is good as far as it goes. They just don't really understand what's going on, but they certainly are better off for believing in it. Unlike the real slobs, the two-legged animals out there that just don't give a damn, they're sadly irredeemable. But the pew potatoes, they're okay. They're okay. We got to be careful, because if they know what we think, they will persecute us, because they simply can't understand it, and you can't expect them to. It's not their fault even. And I tend to think of Gnostic teachers as like Buddhist bodhisattvas. The New Testament casts them as arrogant SOBs. I have no need of you. Well, they might have been that way. It's possible, but I suspect that is projection from people that know there are those that make claims of higher knowledge and resent it. And you think you're better than us. Well, maybe they thought, well, I'm afraid I am in one sense, though it's nothing I can pat myself on the back for. And I think their idea was to be compassionate toward those. Like Nietzsche says, the real Superman doesn't disdain those who aren't on his level. He's not. Why should he be threatened by them? He's got to be careful with them, but he can't let them drag him down, but maybe he can drag them up.
Yeah, well said. Yeah, God bragging to Job reminds me. I don't know if you've seen the movie Zoolander, where Mugato is screaming, "I invented the keyboard necktie. I invented the keyboard."
I've never seen it.
Oh, well, it's a funny movie, but yeah, it's interesting. But also, there's also the idea too that maybe God created a good world, but then his underlings just screwed things. The CEO is fine, but his underlings either rebelled or took over, like the Watchers and Paul, Powers and Principalities. His alter ego, Simon Megas, and these angels. That's another way to for theodicy, right, Bob?
Yeah, that goes back to these old views, probably derived from Plato, that there was a celestial creator, but that he begat gods who lived on earth among human beings, and even created human beings. And that, however, there were some who taught things to humans that they shouldn't have. And that becomes the fallen sons of God, who decided that earth girls are easy, and seduced these women and taught them all kinds of stuff, like wearing makeup and gossiping and tricking their husbands and all that, and taught men the use of weapons and the like. That might have been okay for angels or demigods, but not for humans. And they didn't know what to do with it. And so it got so bad, God decided, I got to drown them all like rats and start over. I'm sorry I made him, if it's come to this. Of course, he didn't exactly make them. It was the fallen sons of God. And I think it's Psalm 82 is part of the same mythology. God says, I say you are gods, all of you, yet you will die like men, like any mortal prince. And you should have vindicated the widow and the orphan and all that. You didn't. And so for that, he sentences them to the underground realm, exactly like Zeus and the Titans. And that's why at the end it says they stumble around in darkness. It was an explanation for earthquakes. But nonetheless, it was like God fired them all. But this was, and at the end it says, arise, O Yahweh, and rule the earth. That was the apocalyptic hope. It's careening out of control, not thanks to God, but thanks to his lieutenants, and he's given them the death sentence. But they're still in charge at the moment. The principalities and powers, the archons of this age, they're the fallen sons of God. And one day they will be kicked out of office. And may that day come soon. It was like a coherent view that explains why the world is such a wretched mess, but God is good. And as Peter Berger says, with this kind of theodicy, it's like it doesn't exactly explain what happens. I mean, it does, but it's not satisfying. Why did God allow them to do this? Well, it's not going to matter once he reverses it. Who's going to care if you're in heaven and everything's fine? Well, it's as much of a mystery as it ever was, but what the heck, I'm not God. But now everything's great, so what the heck?
Yeah, agreed. And Vance, do you have a question or anything from the audience?
I don't see any questions so far, but I do have an observation, and I could put it in the form of a question. Isn't it true that all these models of God imagine God to have the same kind of single linear consciousness that we do? I mean, God's will, couldn't God do two wills at the same time and split off timelines and do all sorts of things? I mean, if he's not limited, but why does he always have to be like just a superhuman,
You have like the Council of Yahwehs, like the Council of Kangs and Council of
Well, I think of what Paul Tillich says, that if there is a God, God must be being itself, because if God were not, then God would not be ultimate. And by God, we mean the ultimate. Now, we can't describe that. It's no thing. It's not a being, even a supreme being. It's being itself. Yet that's pretty sterile as an object of worship.
Right.
And so we have to symbolize God according to the highest state of reality we know, which is personhood. So we should understand that God, like Tillich says, God is a person and the negation of himself as a person. And that to me is very much like Mahayana Buddhism and non-dualist Hinduism, where you're saying the ultimate Brahman is nirguna, without qualities. But we, on our lower level of knowledge, have to posit Brahma, a personal creator who is Brahman Saguna, with qualities. But that's a lower level, like a dreamlike level, higher than us. But it's the product of our limited perception. And so to even, as Spinoza said, to even speak of the will of God is mythological. To think that God has to think an ordered series of thoughts, which is what
Exactly.
you're saying. If God has plans or a will, that's mythical, personalistic thinking. And so it can't really be that. You just have to try to keep straight that, yeah, this is not the absolute. It's kind of like John chapter 12. I love this passage where Jesus says to the crowd, whoever believes in me believes not in me, but in him who sent me. He doesn't say, don't believe in me, you're making a mistake. He says, keep in mind the perspective. I am the way, not the goal. And that's kind of, or like the Zen thing, right? Hey, what is this moon I keep hearing people talk about? Oh, right there. Oh, your hand is the moon? No. And I think that's profound. And they've discovered it in the East and the West. And so even to say God has competing wills, that would still be, that would sort of make him a multiple personality or a schizophrenic. As in a great story by Clark Ashton Smith called Schizoid Creator, where it turns out that God is the devil on his days off. It's really great. What a story.
Love
I
it.
used to read it in class to my students in Intro to Religion, fascinating. Um,
Very
Great.
good.
And I wanted to get also too into the origins of Gnosticism. And I know we've talked about it, but there's always new stuff, and you always bring new stuff too. And I think it's important. For example, scholar Jane McGrath has done a lot of work, and he finds that the Mandeans, Bob, a lot of their terminology, what they name beings and other things, are from First Temple times. There's a kernel in the Mandean religion that goes way back. And then in History Valley, the podcast, Margaret Barker was there about 6 months ago, Bob, and
mm,
she said that when she looks at the Gnostic Gospels and the Aeons and the Archons and their terminology, she sees them as coded, disguised angels and so forth from the days of Solomon. In other words, the Gnostics might have just been smuggling this sort of First
mhm.
Temple, Asherah, animistic stuff, and they were able to do it underground, which makes their origins very ancient, don't you think? Have you heard anything of this? I know.
Oh yeah, I'm a great believer in Margaret
Yeah,
Barker's
she's
work.
rarely wrong, even with her gut. Even if her gut says something, she's right.
Yeah, and she says, for instance, that that Sophia is Asherah,
Mhm.
why do we have the fallen Sophia? Well, because Asherah was suppressed in Israel. And yet she continued. People won't give up what they sincerely believe in. It's like after Vatican II, traditionalist Catholics, they said, look, I'm sorry, but I'm still not eating meat on Friday. I'm sorry, I still believe in purgatory. You can't just change that. Or when Elijah Muhammad died, and his son Warith Deen Muhammad changed everything up to make it more like Sunni Islam. It was predictable that somebody would do what Farrakhan did and said, "Hey, look, we were all just wrong before. No, I think you're wrong now. We're sticking with the old time religion." And and it's absolutely clear that that the archons and so on are it's just a synonym for the fallen sons of God who still rule the nations. God, as in Deuteronomy 32, El Elyon, the Most High God, when he was separating the human race into nations, he said, well, okay, how many sons of God do we have here? I'll create that many nations so each will have a people to rule. And Yahweh, one of his sons, said, well, save Israel for me. And that's how it happened. But like Jephthah, when he's recruited to, I think, fight, who was it, the Ammonites or the Kryptonites or somebody, uh, he tries to he offers a peace gesture. He says to the other king, "Look, why can't you be content with the land that your God Shamash has given you, and we'll be content with what our God Yahweh has given us." Or David, he's driven out by Saul, and he has to work for the Edomites, and he says that I now can't worship Yahweh because I'm not in God's little acre of Israel. I'm in somebody else's little acre. Well, yeah, that's the way they viewed it. Or in Daniel, he's wondering why the heck isn't Michael, the angel, due on time. And he says, "Look, sorry, I'm late, but but the prince of Persia." He intercepted me, and it took me a while to disengage. Now here I am. What is he talking about? Well, the god of the Persians, who is real and was appointed by El Elyon, he didn't get along with Yahweh and so forth. I mean, it all makes perfect sense. Those are the archons, the powers behind the thrones. It's not even a reinterpretation. It's exactly the same thing. Jew and Walter Schmidholz points this out. He says that Gnosticism and Jewish apocalyptic are basically the same thing. And that is slightly in a different register, but basically it's even that's the same thing.